What if you could learn English in almost exactly the same way as you learned your own native language? What if you could get your pronunciation and the way that you speak in English to be almost exactly the same as a native English speaker? Introducing the Pure Method. You see, the thing is, for most people, even when they reach an advanced level of English, they still sound quite foreign. Even though they have an advanced level of English, their pronunciation doesn't sound like a native speaker, their accent sounds foreign, and their choice of words is not the same as a native speaker would use. And also their intonation and which words they stress and which words they don't stress is different from a native speaker. For example, here a native English speaker might say, "I do like fast food, but I try not to eat it." But a non-native English speaker is probably going to stress different words from a native speaker. A non-native English speaker may say, and sorry for the accent here, "I do like fast food, but I try not to eat it." And it just sounds a bit unnatural and just a bit different from the way a native speaker would say it. But with the Pure Method, you get your word stress more similar to a native speaker. But for those who are willing to go through the Pure Method, it may be possible to get pronunciation and intonation and word choice which sounds almost exactly the same as a native English speaker. So what is the Pure Method? Well, to put it simply, the Pure Method is doing only listening all the way from the A1 beginner level up to the B2 upper intermediate level with no speaking, no writing, and no reading, and no grammar at all. And on top of that, if you follow the Pure Method, you use no translation and no subtitles as well. Now, does that sound a bit crazy? Well, it is a little bit crazy. However, the Pure Method does in fact work. You see, the Pure Method tries to copy exactly the same process as what a baby goes through when they learn their own native language. A child understands a large amount of their native language before they ever begin to speak, and definitely before they start to read or write in their language. After all, listening and speaking are things that human beings learn naturally. However, reading and writing are not things that human beings learn naturally. And that's why just 100 or 200 years ago, most people couldn't read or write. But even though most people 200 years ago couldn't read and couldn't write, almost everybody could speak and listen, because speaking and listening are natural things for humans to learn. Anyway, let me explain the Pure Method in a bit more detail. Let's start with speaking. With the Pure Method, you don't say a single word in the language until your listening level and your ability to understand is already at a B2 upper intermediate level, or maybe even higher than that. That means that before you even say a single word in English, you will already have quite a deep understanding of how English works, and you'll already know a large amount of English vocabulary before you even say a single word in English. The idea is that when you do finally begin to speak English, after you have already reached a B2 upper intermediate level of listening, you will choose words that sound natural, and you will not make unnatural word choices because your listening comprehension is already so high. And even though it may still be difficult to pronounce English correctly, it may still be difficult to make the correct sounds with your mouth and your tongue, your pronunciation will be much better than somebody who started speaking right from the beginning. So with the pure method, you go through a silent period all the way from an A1 beginner up until your B2 upper intermediate, or even beyond that. Well, with the pure method, you do no reading whatsoever until you already have a listening level of B2 upper intermediate or higher. This means that you will have no concept of how words are spelt in English. You will have no idea what English looks like when it's written down at all. The only thing that you will know about English are the sounds that you hear, and you will have no idea how those sounds link to words written down on the page. The idea of this is that when you do start to speak, your pronunciation will not be confused by the spelling of words, because you would have never seen the words written down on the page. Instead, you will only know English as sounds that come from people's mouths. So your pronunciation will not get confused by the written version of English, and this will likely give you much better pronunciation than somebody who has been reading English a lot on the page. And so with the pure method, of course, you do no reading at all, but that also includes no subtitles at all with any videos that you watch. By listening to English with no subtitles, you will become very good at listening and understanding native speakers without having to rely on the written words in subtitles at the bottom of the screen. So even after you reach an upper intermediate B2 level of English, if somebody were to ask you, how do you spell the word thank you? You would have no idea, because you would have never seen English written down on the page. That's the idea of the pure method. What about writing? Well, with the pure method, you may have guessed it, you do no writing whatsoever until you have already reached an upper intermediate B2 level of English. Because to write words down means to focus on the spelling of the words and the written version of English, which, according to the pure method, can interfere with the way that you speak English. Now, what about grammar? Well, with the pure method, you do no grammar study whatsoever. You don't open a single grammar book. You don't learn what the present simple is, or the present perfect, or the second conditional, or articles, or prepositions. You don't even learn the terms for what these things are called. And so if you follow the pure method, you may get very good English, but if somebody asks you, which preposition should I use? Or if somebody asks you, how do I use the present perfect? You will respond, what's the present perfect? I don't know what that is, right? If somebody asks you, when should I use the second conditional tense? You will respond, what's the second conditional tense? I've never heard of that. So the idea of the pure method is that you never learn these terms about grammar. You never learn anything about grammar whatsoever. You only listen to English the entire time. The idea of the pure method is that you will be able to say maybe a third conditional sentence like, if I had woken up earlier this morning, I would have arrived on time. You will be able to say a sentence like this without even knowing what it is, without even knowing that that is the third conditional. You will just be able to say this without thinking, just because it sounds correct. And you will have no idea that you're using a third conditional. You will have no idea that that's actually quite an advanced piece of grammar, because you will not know what is advanced grammar and what is basic grammar, because you would have never opened a grammar textbook and you would have never been told what is the beginner grammar and what is the advanced grammar. And so if somebody asks you, what's the third conditional and when should I use it? You would respond, third conditional? What's that? I have no idea what you're talking about. And even though you will have no idea what the third conditional is, you will be able to use it perfectly. At least that's the idea of the pure method. And of course, this is just like a native speaker. If you ask a random native speaker about the third conditional, they will have no idea what you're talking about, but they will be able to use the third conditional without thinking at all. If you think about it like this, the English language came first, and then grammar concepts were added later on by academics who were trying to understand the language. English speakers had been using the future perfect tense and the present perfect tense and all the prepositions and all of the grammar without ever giving it a label to what it is. Like 300 years ago, people were using the present perfect tense every day without anybody ever giving it a label called the present perfect tense. The language came first, and then people added grammar labels onto the language afterwards. The idea of the pure method is that the grammar is learned so deeply that you will begin to be able to just use advanced grammar without really thinking much about it. There's one more important part of the pure method that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's that with the pure method you do no translating to your native language at all. No Google Translate, no DeepL translator, no dictionaries even. You don't translate anything into your native language. After all, why should you use a translator to translate between two completely different language systems that cannot really be translated directly from one to the other? Let me give you an example to demonstrate this from Spanish. In Spanish, there's a verb called enseñar, which if you put into a translator, will give you the translation to teach in English. So it may seem like if you see the verb enseñar in Spanish, you can just think in your head, to teach, like that. But actually, the verb enseñar doesn't just mean to teach, it can also mean something like to show in Spanish as well. For example, in Spanish, you might say something like, te voy a enseñar mi casa, which if translated into English would mean, I'm going to show you my house. But the thing is, what we have here are two completely different language systems. We have the language system of English, and then we have the language system of Spanish, and you cannot, with 100% accuracy, translate from English to Spanish or Spanish to English. The meaning of the words are not directly translatable. Let me give you another example from Spanish. In Spanish, you have the verb pensar, which if translated into English would give you to think. But actually, pensar does not mean to think. Pensar means pensar, and to think means to think. They are not exactly the same, even if the differences are very, very subtle. So the way to think about it is pensar means pensar, and to think means to think. So don't think to yourself if you take a verb, if you take a word in English, don't think, oh, that means this in my native language. No. The verb comer in Spanish can be translated to eat in English. But you should not be thinking that, oh, okay, comer means to eat. No, that is not the right way to think about it. The verb comer means comer, and the verb to eat in English means to eat. Comer does not mean to eat. Does that make sense? Because they are two completely different language systems, and you should not really be trying to translate between them. And that's why with the pure method, you do no translation at all, because that way you don't get confused or misled from translating between one language and another. You don't learn that comer means to eat in English. You just listen to Spanish, you never translate any of the words, and your brain just understands that comer means That's it. It's not that comer means to eat, it's that comer means comer, right? and you learn the verb comer and on a more deep level rather than translating back to your native language, if that makes sense. If you learn the language like this with no translating whatsoever, you will not have to take an extra step to think about how to speak. You will not have to think, okay, I'm going to speak Spanish. Okay, pensar, that means to think and then speak. Instead, pensar is pensar. It just comes out straight away. There is no need for the extra step of translating from one language to another. And I see many people, they say they have this problem that they keep translating in their head. Like when they're learning English, they say they keep translating from their native language to English. But if you follow the pure method, you will not have this step of translating because you would have never translated any of the language ever. So you would not really be thinking about what the English words mean in your language. No, you would just know the English words as they are in English, in the English language system, without trying to translate them from the English language system into your own language system and taking this extra step, which can cause you to hesitate and slow down when you're speaking. First of all, does the pure method actually work? Can you really learn a language by doing no translating, using no subtitles, doing no reading, no writing, and no speaking until you've reached a nearly advanced level of listening, an upper intermediate B2 level of listening? Is this possible? Is it possible really to learn a language using the pure method? Yes, it is. It is very possible, and it can give very good results. In fact, on the Spanish website Dreaming Spanish, many people have already learned Spanish using the pure method very successfully. So the pure method is possible for sure. However, I do think that the pure method comes with some disadvantages that are important that I will explain now. Disadvantage number one. I think personally that using the pure method to learn a language probably takes longer. It probably takes more hours in total to reach an advanced level of English using 100% the pure method than it would by using other ways of learning. I do think that students who use the pure method do end up with really good results, with natural sounding pronunciation and very, very native sounding intonation and native sounding word choices. But I do think it takes a lot longer to reach that level. It probably takes hundreds of hours longer using the pure method. Personally, I think that doing maybe a little bit of grammar study, not a lot, not too much, just a little bit, can help to speed up the process of learning English. What you can do, if you like, is do just a little bit of basic grammar study, just a little bit, just to understand, let's say, the basic idea. For example, if you want to learn the second conditional, maybe you can just find out just the basic idea of what the second conditional is, that it's a way of speaking which is used to talk about imaginary situations, and that you use the past tense in the first part of the sentence, and then usually you use the words would or could or might. For example, if I had $1 million, I would buy a house. It could be good just to learn the basic idea of the second conditional, but then go and do loads and loads and loads of comprehensible input listening while people use the second conditional to learn it a lot. I think doing a little bit of grammar study can save a bit of time compared to the pure method where you do no grammar study whatsoever. This is just my personal opinion. The second disadvantage of the pure method is that I think for many people who do it, it can be a little bit frustrating. The reason the pure method can be frustrating is because you need to spend a lot of time listening to and watching comprehensible input without really understanding what's going on. Like when you use the pure method, you will see people saying things like, if I had more money, I would buy a house. If I had more time, I would see my friends more often. But you will have no understanding as to why they are using the word would here. And why are they using the past tense had? If I had more time, why are they doing that? The problem with the pure method is that you will have no understanding as why they're doing that. And that's fine with the pure method. But for some students, it can be a bit frustrating because you need to spend a lot of time listening to English without having any answers to your questions, right? You may have a question in your head. Why do they use the word would here? Why do they use the past tense had in this sentence? But because you're doing the pure method, you get no answers to these questions, right? You may have a question in your head for grammar, but you're not allowed to go and look for an answer to your question, right? Because that would not be following the pure method, which can be a bit frustrating for some people. It can be frustrating to have a question about grammar in your head, but then not really be allowed to find the answer. To follow the pure method, you have to be okay with not understanding really why things are happening. For some people, this is absolutely fine. For other people, it can be a bit frustrating for them. I recommend if a grammar question pops into your head, if you think, why do they use the word would here? Why did they use the past tense had? What's going on? Then go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT or an AI the question and get the answer and go, okay, I understand. And then go back to your listening, go back to your comprehensible input. And finally, I think that with the pure method, using no subtitles and no translating, again, can be a little bit frustrating for some people. Personally, I don't think there's a big problem with using subtitles on your videos when you're listening to comprehensible input. I don't think this is going to really, I don't think it's really a big problem. And also, I don't really think it's a big problem to use a translator sometimes, right? Now, sometimes to use Google Translate to translate a word into your own language. I don't think it's a big problem. You know, with the pure method, you're not supposed to do that, but I don't think it's a big issue to do it sometimes, as long as you're not translating everything that you're listening to. So what do I think about all this? I think the pure method is great. It's really good for people who are maybe a little bit obsessive and maybe people who are slightly crazy and who want to, you know, really with the pure method, you're probably going to be watching, let's say 1,500 hours of English comprehensible input before you do anything else, right? So before you speak, before you write, before you read, you will need to do at least 1,500 hours of listening before you do anything. If you're quite obsessive and you think you can do this, then please go ahead. I think the pure method can work very well. But I know from my experience of learning Spanish, I really am not able to, I was not able to do this. I would get bored only doing listening the whole time. So for me, in my opinion, doing a little bit of reading is not a big deal. It's fine. Doing a little bit of speaking sometimes is okay. Maybe a little bit of writing if you're a bit bored, right? And like I said, doing a bit of grammar, maybe spending 5% of your time on grammar, maybe spending 5% of your time on reading, maybe spending 5% of your time on speaking, and then using the rest of your time, let's say 80% or 85% of your time just listening to comprehensible input. That's the method that I recommend. I recommend people use a comprehensible input majority method, which means that you spend the majority of your time learning English just listening to comprehensible input. But I'm not so strict like the pure method. The pure method is very strict. I say if you want to do a bit of reading, a bit of writing, or maybe a bit of speaking, if you want to do a bit of grammar study, if you want to use a translator, if you want to use subtitles on the video, I'm not so strict. I would say it's okay. You can do it. You don't have to be so strict like the pure method is. So that's why I say the pure method is a bit extreme, and it is very good for some people who are like a bit obsessive and who are really committed to learning with the pure method. But you will have to be very committed because, like I said, you will have to listen to English for thousands of hours without doing anything else. And I think for the average person, this maybe would get a bit boring after a while. That's why I recommend spending the majority of your time listening to comprehensible input. But if you want to go and do something else, to have a bit of fun with the language, do a bit of writing, maybe speak a little bit, I think it's okay. I think you're still going to get great results like this. So yeah, I think the pure method is fantastic. I just think it's maybe a little bit extreme, a little bit strict, and I would recommend a bit more of a relaxed version of the pure method, where you spend most of your time doing comprehensible input listening, but if you want to spend some time doing other things, I think it's okay. Anyway, I know that this is a bit of a controversial video. Some people think the pure method is silly. Some people think the pure method is fantastic. Like I said, I think it's a good method. But of course, this is an alternative way to learn English. It's not the traditional way. So if you don't agree with it, that is absolutely fine. And let me know what you think of the pure method in the comments section below, and I will see you in the next one.